Great to see you all on the webinar. Great to have a great panel with us. Thank you for joining. We are going to talk about the state of data analysis. First of all, we're going to do some introductions. I'm technical evangelist at Tableau. That's my role. I've been at Tableau for nearly 10 years and started using Tableau back in November 2007 when I was a data analyst at the University of Oxford, frustrated using monolithic BI tools. Joined in 2011. I now host a video series about the data zeitgeist called If Data Could Talk, video series called Chart Chat, where we look at the month's visualizations, amongst other things. And I also wrote a book, but we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes because it's going to form our first question. And before I go through the agenda, let's meet our other panelists. Charles, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Good, let's see, morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. So pleasure to be here. Charles Wilson. I head up our product and merchandising consumer insights at New Balance. This spans globally footwear and apparel. So no shortage of interest here. Our team typically works on product creation, so bringing new products to life, and then where we place them and what happens to them once they hit the market. I've been at New Balance for 5 years and still in awe every day that I get to work on stats, sports, and sneakers. Like I said, pleasure to be here.
Stats, sports, and sneakers. Also alliterative, which makes it even better. Thank you, Charles. Parker, say hello.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Andy. My name is Parker Dillon. I'm currently a senior consultant at Slalom in our data and analytics practice in Boston. I've spent my whole career in data and analytics in some form. I started as a data analyst, so was in the trenches. I kind of transitioned to more of the BI engineering, so establishing the tools and technologies for data analysts to leverage in a BI center of excellence. And now working with Slalom, I help our clients do that same. So how do we leverage tools, technologies, people, and processes to make organizations more data literate and make sure we're using data to drive business decisions. And very happy to be here with all these awesome folks.
All right, great to have you. Thank you. And finally, Manav.
Thank you, Andy. Glad to be here. So I started my career as a software engineer very early on. I switched over to a consultant role where I got to see how analytics solutions were being implemented and how widespread the need for more and more analytics and BI. At that time, I kind of decided, let me go near the kind of mecca of analytics and technology that is US. That's when I moved to US to pursue MBA, focused on a few of the areas close to my passion areas like strategy, marketing, as well as data, which included a lot of stats and analytics related courses. I think I got a very interesting opportunity when I joined Leapfrog. It was in early days. It had, I think probably a lot of you fell into similar situation. They had started collecting a lot of data, but they didn't know what to do with it. They had moved into smart products, so they had very interesting data. I came there almost at the ground level and got to firsthand explore that data, kind of show the use case to a lot of other teams, how they can use it and grow the team there. So I grew the team from scratch there. That was a very, I would say, rich and interesting experience for me. I was there for a long time. And I would say recently, around 2.5 years ago, I moved to Adobe, which is later in their transformation. They have data, they had analysts, but they were trying to take it to the next level, build the team around it, and delve more into now data science as well. And they have a lot of, I would say, central teams supporting some of the building blocks that we had to build at Leapfrog as well. So I'm happy to be here and with this esteemed panel.
All right, fantastic. So, as you can see, a lot of analytical experience amongst the panelists, and I guess I've been in the game a long time. And what we wanted to achieve for the next 40 minutes is to look at the state of data analysts. When I started, I was working with monolithic, locked down, inflexible, unfun business intelligence tools. The name of the company I will not reveal. The field has changed, right? So we want to know, how has the pendulum swung? What is the changes in the role since we all started, and where do we think the role is going to go in the future? Also, things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, taking our jobs away, helping our jobs, or just a bunch of hot air? Who knows? We'll answer all of those questions in the next 40 minutes. You can also get involved by saying hi in the chat and typing some questions in the Q&A. We will have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for open questions, but we can try and incorporate those as we go. That sounds good. Let's get going. So the first topic, one of the things I recognized working with Tableau and working with customers is that a core part of data analysis, certainly back in 2016 when we started the process, is dashboards. How do we monitor what's going on? And if you're into a good book, I co-wrote the Big Book of Dashboards with Steve Wexler and Jeff Schaefer. This came out in 2017. It's a whole bunch of dashboards that we found from the real world, and the goal is be inspired and steal those ideas and apply them to your own. But this book's 4 years old now. The world has changed, or has it? So our first question is really based around the core, some of the core roles of a data analyst. Dashboards, are they still the main way we monitor our world? So let's go start with you, Charles. Tell us, dashboards in 2021, still the main?
Yeah, so I think still playing a role. And for us, I think the role is anchoring that one source of truth for an organization. Certainly for those who are more data inclined, or perhaps looking at more nuanced data, there's a desire to want to have something that's more interactive and maybe less static. But if we think about our world, things get nuanced fairly quickly. So if I'm just talking about, hey, how's the business, or what's trending these days, I could be talking about men's or women's sneakers, or unisex. I could be talking about a wearer or a buyer. I could be talking about different channels of trade. And so in order to anchor the dialogue around certain facts, we found it's effective still to have dashboards that are widely accessible, and then, quite frankly, like fairly static, just so if somebody needs to refer to, again, that sort of source of truth, that is democratized and accessible to all. I think where we have been migrating away from dashboards would be for some newer either pockets of exploration or within a select group among whom we know that there's a higher level of data sophistication, where we feel more confident, I think, unleashing that potential.
I guess, Charles, I mean, in your industry, there will be new questions tomorrow that you can't anticipate today. So maybe an influencer starts wearing some of your sneakers, then suddenly you've got a new question about that influencer and those sneakers and that data platform, right? You can't always guess them.
Yeah, certainly, Andy. So I think we look to anchor our dashboards onto probably larger scale macro questions at time that have less of that sort of either day-to-day or week-to-week fluctuation, or where we've sort of staked out the terrain. So we know we will care about our brand and our partnership with our wholesale partners this week, next year. Being able to have a framework for that discussion and a common language is absolutely vital across a global business. So that's where I think, as we think through design, ensuring something like a total addressable market and likelihood for success in that market isn't viewed 3 or 4 separate ways within the company, where, we might have varying opinions, but at least from a factual perspective, we're all anchored on the same numbers. Yeah,
great. Fantastic. Okay, so I love that. The macro focus for the key dashboards is a nice focus. Manav, what do you think? Do you think the dashboard is dead or still pulsing and living?
Yeah, I think it's a creature that's going to live, but I think the time that analysts spend on it's going to shrink over time. The promise has been there for a while, but still a lot of time, as I think even Charles kind of mentioned, it goes into building those dashboards. And as we have more, I would say, to me, the more kind of front and center problem to solve is to have good enough data sets if we have well-defined data sets across kind of functions in a company, that you can use it as a single source of truth rather than using the dashboard as a single source of truth, then I think the promise and the technology is there that the time is going to shrink. I would anticipate in 5 years close to not more than 10-20% of the time I would see analysts spending on building dashboards and doing more kind of exploratory stuff, solving newer questions, etc.
All right. Okay, that's brilliant. So 2026, we're going to be spending 20% of our time building dashboards. We'll come back to the webinar in 2026 and we'll see where we are. I like that prediction. Before I come to Parker, I guess, in chat, you can tell us whether you think the dashboard is still the main vehicle, the main output for analysts or not. If not, what is coming? But Manav, if the data set is something we need to focus on, do you think analysts, why the single data set? What can we do with a single data set that we don't do with a single dashboard?
I think it's like the extremes. When I say data set, where I'm leading towards is, in my view, the maximum impact that analysts create, in my experience I've seen, is when we try to unlock new questions, and that involves, usually right now, it starts with maybe a question starts maybe at a dashboard, like why is this down? And then it leads to an exploration, where we need to go write a query, join data, and maybe the data set is not even there in our tables. We need to bring it in. So to me, the more time we can free up, ideally, for the analyst to kind of explore that data to solve the questions that we haven't even thought of right now, the more impact they can create, and more towards art they can go and understand what various functions are doing, what decisions they need to take, rather than just building like dashboards, which will be there, but they can do even more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, Parker, what do you think? Is my book going to be selling in 5 years' time, or will it be dead?
I'm sure it will. It's a great book.
Thank you.
I would say I believe that dashboards, in the sense that we understand them today, will and hopefully will start to be decreased as we start to rely more on data-driven insights and predictive analytics that can alert you when something changes, or when a key element of your data acts a certain way, so you're not having to continuously go back to a dashboard and monitor it, that the user can be notified. So hopefully the amount of dashboards can be decreased in the future, because I do think we create too many dashboards these days. I also hope that the term dashboard is used less. Right, it's a catch-all bucket right now that business users, they say dashboard and they mean many different things, and we all kind of know that. I reference back often to a Tableau conference session that I listened in on, where it took the 13 data displays that are unfortunately all called dashboards, and it broke down them and categorized them. And we've actually used that to use that content to train not only our consultants at Slalom, but also our stakeholders. Right? Let's speak more specific and use the correct language rather than just calling everything a dashboard. So I guess to kind of sum, I hope how we use dashboards is reduced in the future with more advanced ways that data can alert us when something changes. And I hope that we start using more specific language and we don't just consider everything a dashboard. So both ways, I hope we reduce our kind of sense of what a dashboard is.
Absolutely. I find my day-to-day data tracking is I use Tableau Mobile, and this display is 3 metrics. I'm just tracking those 3 metrics. They're all about my exercise. Is that a dashboard? I don't know. It's metrics on the front page of Tableau mobile app, right? That's what it is. We got in some arguments with Stephen Few about our definition of the word dashboard in the book. It's deliberately vague, because you're right, Parker. I don't know what a dashboard is. All I care is, are you monitoring what you need to monitor in an efficient way possible? You can call it candy floss if you want. I really don't mind. I think we'll still be monitoring things. All right, excellent. So I see Samir's got a question about data analysts and AI. That's a great question. We'll be coming on to that in after this second topic. So good question, Samir. Okay, next we're going to talk about the change. You know, I'm getting old. I'm feeling old and wise. And yeah, Tableau is a brand new thing. Self-service BI wasn't really a thing when I started using Tableau. So how has the role evolved in the last few years, and where do we think it's going? You know, people on this webinar, I'm sure, are interested in what's the future of data analysis. So, Parker, why don't you start with this one and tell us, you know, what's happened since you started, and what's a data analyst going to be concerned about in 4 or 5 years' time?
Sure. And I'll first say that the term data analyst is also very vague, kind of like by design, right? There's many people who have the role of a data analyst, but there's so many different things that they could be doing. I'll just point out one kind of specific observation that I've found in the last couple of months and years, and where I think it's going to continue down this path is, with the emergence of massive MPP engines like Starburst and Trino, and cloud data warehouses like Snowflake. I think what I've noticed is that getting data into the hands of what we consider data analysts is easier, and we can do it faster. That, coupled with the fact that writing queries and having them run fast is happening more and more, right? Unfortunately, that leads often to poorly written queries. Even though if they run fast, it's not scalable. So what we have noticed is that a lot of these traditional data analysts are doing, what I consider data engineering on the fly. So they have to do a lot of prepping and cleansing of the data just to build a single chart. That's not necessarily efficient, but what we want to do is we want to train them to make sure they understand how best to prepare data for, scalable analysis, right? You have to understand what kind of environment, what team you're working on. Like, do you have analytics engineers and data engineers that you can, help them create more flexible foundational data structures? If not, let's just write more efficient SQL, even though, we can spin up the size of our compute engines and any query will result in a couple seconds. That's not necessarily what we want to do. So I think we're seeing a big shift where data analysts are, they're going to need to kind of pick up some of the more technical skills that might have been reserved for a data engineer, so that they can better kind of scale out their organization's BI and analytics.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny, you're kind of separating data analysis and data engineering by using those terms. I think even my own categorization probably would have put data analysis in that data engineering pocket as well. But that only goes to show the vagueness of the terms. That's exactly great. Yeah, Charles, how do you think? Is Parker on the right track? Do you think we're anything different?
Yeah, definitely. And Parker, I appreciate the terminology difference too, because I think that's something that holds true for us, which is we try to have this line of demarcation between people who are responsible for like the data integrity itself, and that's done on a collaborative basis, but that would live more within our business analytics and IT departments. And then on our side, we're focused more on the utilization of the analyst's time of impacting those business decisions. So if I think about the progression of the data analyst role, like setting aside all of the engineering perspective, two things I think have come to mind, and I think are skill sets that I'm actively looking for the future. One is this idea of being proactive instead of reactive. So I think there are some legacy data analysis requests, which is either just get me the number, or I need to plug this into a bigger either presentation or scope of work. Can you help me? And while that's efficient in some capacities, it's not really the best utilization, I think, of time for a data analyst. I would want this data analyst, and it sort of goes into the second skill or capability that I see growing, which is the ability to be embedded within that sort of business unit and to have a sort of sharp perspective on why we're doing any of this. So the data analyst's analysis shouldn't be the end of itself. It's like sort of like a means to a sort of bigger overall analysis of whatever that might be. So, the state of our consumer business, the health of our category over here. And so the more that a data analyst can be either the creator or spark for a sharp hypothesis for testing, That I see is just becoming like a critical skill, because I think everybody on this call, there's no shortage of data whatsoever. So again, less concerned about is the number or is the data set available? Can we do it rapidly? It's more, what are we going to do with it once we conduct the analysis? And then how do you sort of champion that insight most effectively within the organization?
That's excellent. And so one thing to pick up on there is, do you think the change has happened that the data analysts are now embedded in the business, right? That there should there be a core central function, or should the analysis be pushed out to the business?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think from an org structure perspective, the data analyst could live anywhere. It's more that as they're working on either a project, whether that be a small scale scope of work or a sort of ongoing relationship, I kind of see like that analyst effectiveness is going to like reach this force multiplier once they like truly understand the workings behind the request. So even right now, like we're looking to build out our team, and one of the key questions we ask about is being able to take ambiguous business requests, translate that into a scope of work, and then communicate that back to the business team in form of recommendations.
All right, brilliant, fantastic. Okay, thanks, Charles. And Manav, what's your perspective on this? Maybe advice for budding analysts, or where do you think things are going to change?
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback a little bit of what Charles said. So to me, so there are some standard skills or tools you need in your armory. Like you need those technical skills to be a data analyst. You need the right data, which I think more and more data engineers are playing a role there to be able to use those skills. I think what's becoming increasingly, and in my experience, what I've seen, like there could be a difference of almost a factor of 2 between a great data analyst and a data analyst who's just answering a question that the teams throw at them, and that I think is almost enough drive or curiosity to go into a role that they are partnering with. So to give an example, if they're partnering with a product manager, they're almost curious enough to understand why does the product manager need this data and what is the decision they're going to make, what is the process behind this. So they're almost able to wear that hat. And the term I use within my team and when I'm hiring is like thought partnership or thought leadership. So it's not, our job is not to just provide data A. Like if someone asks, oh, I need this data, I give you data A. It's like, what's the thought behind it? What are you trying to solve for? And the data analyst has to be curious enough to dig deeper, maybe ask questions, maybe read about it. And I've seen people who are curious enough. I've seen two kind of sets of people who really love data and they want to stay in this longer term for years. But I've seen data analysts become like a foundational block where people who kind of become curious enough that they essentially move to that role eventually. Like if they're partnering, so I've seen people starting as a data analyst and then going towards a product manager role or whoever they were partnering with more. They have to be at the cusp of being curious enough that they almost want to play that role. So that's where I've seen maximum impact. Like they're almost thinking for them. It's like, why don't you do this A/B test? Like, why are you doing this A/B test? I know you want this data, but that doesn't look right. Let's do this. They're questioning the hypothesis and coming up with original hypothesis. I think that's what I'm seeing. People who are creating most impact are there, like the curiosities kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. Charles, I see you're nodding. Do you have evidence of that kind of thing happening in New Balance?
Yeah, certainly. So both at New Balance and my previous lives at Duncan Forrester, I think, Manav, your point around curiosity and then the effectiveness of an internal transfer is spot on. So as I think about people who either have rotated teams or I've been part of internal rotations as well, that just like subtle shift in responsibility makes those people fantastic partners for both the previous team and the new team. Again, just sort of tightening those connections of how data and insights get leveraged. And then I think that sort of ongoing relationship just gets further strengthened by having someone who literally used to do that role or who was so curious about the future role that they wanted to take on that responsibility themselves.
Yeah, that's great. That's exciting. I think there's some well, there's always going to be a future for data analysts. It is going to be amazing to see how it evolves. And in fact, that brings us on to our next topic quite well. So Samir has also asked some questions about artificial intelligence, AI. Before I get into some of my questions, the questions from Samir are, well, maybe dashboards will be bypassed by the end-to-end processes. In other words, you don't need to look at a dashboard and then make a decision. The AI and the analytics underneath it tells you the decision, and you go and take action. It's like, I'd love to not have to think and just be told what to do. Is that a possibility? So AI, machine learning, you don't go far in this industry without hearing all about it. So I'm interested. What's the impact going to be on us as analysts and the field in general? Parker, what do you think? Is it hyperbole or is it reality?
I think there's some very powerful ways it can be applied. When I think about the different tools out there and how they're embedding it within the product themselves, drawing insights out of the data without you having to write a SQL query or build a visual. It can just tell you. I think those are valid. I think at a macro scale, I still do think that AI and ML is a bit overhyped. I think we all know the power of it. I mean, it can be leveraged and used to create incredible things with regards to like new products or efficiencies, but it's still very hard to execute in practice. And I think I've seen at the companies that I worked for and some of our clients that they try to run before they walk or crawl. By putting in an AI model and machine learning into a production code and having it run a website or something like that. That's something that's very hard to do and it takes a lot of resources. I do think that there is a place for the data analyst to leverage AI and ML to draw out interesting insights, right? It doesn't have to be an advanced model that is building your product. It can be a data analyst leveraging, a tool that has AI and ML built into it that says, oh, here's an insight that you didn't necessarily think of or try to, here's maybe you didn't have a question for this, but here's the answer before you even kind of like have to ask the question. So I do think there's a place for it, but I still do think that, when we think about the hype curve, we're getting towards or somehow within the trough of disillusionment with regards to data science, but I'm optimistic that we will soon get to the kind of plateau of productivity. Yeah, and some companies are already there, right?
Yeah, I think there's a very interesting distinction. There's the way platforms like ours and like Tableau are embedding AI in order to augment the analyst. We're trying to make the analyst's job easy. And then there's like applying AI principles to your data in order to make bespoke decisions for your organization. So excellent point. What do you think, Charles? Are you using AI? Actually, before you answer that question, to all of you watching, put in the chat, let us know, are you excited about AI? Are you using machine learning? Are you disillusioned? What is it that's going to tip you over and get you excited if you're not excited, or what is exciting you? Okay, but Charles, what's your take at New Balance?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's a net positive for any data analyst, and Parker, you hit upon it. The ability to augment the role of amplifying curiosity and hypotheses testing. So if I think about areas where it's been successful for us, going back to those data sources, a huge source of data would be images and text and things that aren't traditionally just computated. So how we make sense of all this, at times unstructured, organic consumer touch points, it's pretty difficult to fathom how to do that without some AI machine learning assistance. The reason why I think it becomes augmentation for data analysts as opposed to replacement, twofold. One, I think the edge cases for anything are really difficult to ascertain unless there's somebody behind the wheel. So if we're looking at, even like a target consumer or a type of styling or patterns of text in customer reviews, if something non-intuitive emerges, we need somebody to pressure test that to say, like, hey, we weren't expecting that, but there's something here, or we weren't expecting that, and here might be sort of the causal reasons why there's this edge case. The second would then be, again, sort of going back to organizational effectiveness. Not everybody's thinking about this, and so Andy, we said like it'd be fantastic to have a role where you don't have to think. I think it's like the antithesis of that, which is you actually need to be like sharper than ever in order to make the AI output effective.
I think that's the reality. I mean, I do like thinking. It's been
Not
a great. I know. That's a great point. Right now, where was I? Manav, I think you've probably got something to say to add on to what Charles has got there. Because what's your feelings on the AI progression?
Yeah. So I think there are two. I'm going to focus two kind of points here. I think AI ML in general, as it relates to the analyst and as it relates to kind of hardcore product or engineering teams, etc. I think as what I've seen, and I'll start with the first one. What I've seen is I think there's so much. There is promise, but there's a lot of excitement on what is the latest and greatest kind of algorithm out there. We need to use it. It's become so easy right now. You can like take the latest code, write one line of code, and you have a model ready, right? But I think where I've seen success is if we start with where are we actually set up to create an impact? Like if I create 20 segments of something, can we actually use that anywhere in the product or marketing, etc.? So start reverse from there, see where can we create impact. For example, let's say we are building a churn model. Are we able to utilize it somewhere? And start with a very simple model there, which you can explain. If you're starting like fresh there, which you can explain rather than a black box. And start slow there, do some experimentation, show the impact, and then grow from there. And you can use an older algorithm. You don't, especially just for analytics purposes, you don't need to use the latest algorithm out there to prove the use case. On the other side of the spectrum, where this being used in the product, which I get to see some of it in Adobe, where they have the whole Adobe Sensei, which is kind of the cutting edge AI ML. I think that's a more research focused, and some individuals may realize they may want to switch to that direction, where it's more of a ML engineer route, where you're working on the latest research out there, and then you have access to rich image data or other data, and you're trying to classify it, etc. That's also very interesting, but I think that you may start with the analyst role there, and you may want to move towards more research. I think that's also rapidly being growing and rapidly being used by a lot of companies.
Yeah.
But for this discussion, I would focus on the first one. I think where the problem I see is we are almost overexcited with the hype, and we're like, oh, let's use the latest algorithm, and too broad of a problem to solve before we create impact with a smaller problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I was speaking to a customer just this week, and they were lamenting the fact that they've got all their data in 250 PDFs, and that what their first step is to try and get it into a spreadsheet, right? And so there's lots of customers who are still, lots of people out there who are still like, we can't even get the data yet, and so again, it also depends, I think, where you are on the journey. Amapreet asks to you, Manav, I guess, but anybody can join in. How do you build in security and audit considerations for AI? Well, that's a trivial question. How do you build in security and audit considerations? And Manav, my challenge is for you to answer that in about 30 seconds, because we have one more topic.
Sure. I'll start with the caveat that I'm no expert in that specific field, but I've heard enough discussions at Adobe. I think there's a broader discussion, I think, across industry of security and also ethics. There are like a lot of initiatives of the one I've listened to more and more is how to make sure I think the one of the recent research that has come out is content can be generated. So it's not original. So how do we make sure that it's original content, or we kind of classify it? So in general, I think there would need to be a protocol like across industries, across companies that they need to adopt to make sure it's not kind of there's less room for uh, uh, kind of privacy concerns, etc., or artificial content being generated.
Mm-hmm.
For security, I think as much data can be anonymized or as much secure protocols can be there. So what data can be used for what use cases, that's pretty strict,
Yeah.
I would say, in Adobe, I've seen in general. So that I hope that answers in 30 seconds. I think I'm
Yeah, it's a whole field
yeah,
of discipline. Yeah, that's it.
could be another talk in itself, so I'm not going to.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay, so we got one more topic before we'll open it to questions. So if you do have questions, and there are a couple we'll get to, please type them in now. Final question, we'll go around. It's one that I find fascinating. Is data science, or is data analysis an art or a science? Tell us what you think in the chat window, please. I want to hear all your opinions. Is it an art or a science? Charles, what do you say? Why?
I'll start with science, and it's one in which there's creativity and thought behind it, but I hesitate to call it art in that there's no sort of unstructured aspect of the analytical capability. Like the sort of like the raw skill set needs to be present. Oftentimes, and like we very much live in a world of art and science.
Yeah.
When we were talking about this before the panel, I thought about if a data analyst would ever play the all art role in one of those conversations internally, and the chances are slim. So I would think.
So you're saying science?
I would go with science.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now we're getting some answers in chat, but I think I should have said no one's allowed to sit on the fence here because we know what the real answer is, but no fence sitting. Parker, Parker, art or science?
I think I would agree with Charles. I mean, I think there absolutely is an art element to it, and tools like Tableau have made that clear. I think the art element of a data analyst is, considered like the visual design or the final presentation of the data. But if we say that a data analyst or data analysis is art versus science, then you give creative freedom to that artist and they can do whatever they want with the data, right? We don't necessarily want that. We want to still be rooted in our, traditional statistical, foundations of, causation rather than just, correlation and, statistical significance. We want to make sure we're founded in that. So it's founded in science. It still is science, but there is most definitely an art aspect of it, right? You can do a great analysis and have a terrible visual and it's lost to the end user. So I would still say science.
Okay, thanks. Manav, are you going to give one to the art team?
Yeah, I'll deviate from this. I think it's, to me, it's almost like for art, you use the set of brushes which are kind of standard. So to me, the tools that we are using for analysis are kind of the set of brushes or the paints, etc., that we use. But to me, the curiosity that creates most impact, like, for example, if you're building models, the feature engineering is to me, it's almost like art. You have to think very curiously. You need to have that creative freedom to come up with totally new features that no one has thought of, and then your model may outperform. Similarly, for analysis, you have to think of all different angles. So to me, it's art which is kind of embedded in science, which is using science fundamentals, but the art aspect kind of create more impact to me. So I think it's kind of what the chat is suggesting. It's scientific art.
I think it's an artistic science personally, but we can have that argument forever. To even it out, I'm going to say art. So there you go. It's a 2-all split, but that's the beauty of this field. Actually, genuinely, I think that's why being an analyst is amazing. Tools like Tableau have really increased the diversity of people who come into the field because you've got people from very different backgrounds who can find a great deal of joy from it. So great. Okay, so we can open it up to questions. We've got a couple. In fact, we might only have time for one. So let's see. Got a question on return on investment from the money spent on analysts and data analysts. I don't know, Parker or Charles, well, we'll come to any of you, but does everybody have some way of measuring ROI on the investment? Parker, you're nodding. Charles, yep, you've gone in.
Oh, sure, yeah, just chime in briefly. I mean, I think where the easiest ROI case is quantified, though it might not be the highest ROI, is looking at where you're making lots of decisions. So our brand releases thousands of different, if you're thinking about from like each product that has many different colors, we're coming out with thousands of new products a quarter. Even just nudging that to a slightly more favorable hit ratio on a seasonal basis, your analyst is worth it right there.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Parker, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say it's next to impossible and almost fruitless to do so. If you try to quantify the questions that weren't asked by a non-technical user or the insights that didn't drive a pivot in the business, like it's going to be impossible. How I've seen it succeed is that you enforce data-driven goals from the top down from an organization, and make sure each team's individual goals have KPIs that align to those as well. And then it's a required business function, right? It's like email or an IM, right? It's necessary. Data analysis and the analysts themselves are a necessary part of your business because it's required to measure KPIs, which is how you're measuring your company goals.
That's a great answer. So let's leave that one there. Manav, I'll come to you. There's another question. I'm coming to you with all the AI questions. Samir asks, what's the reason that a lot of people aren't trusting AI? Is that down to the data analyst? Is it down to the data? You've got 1 minute to talk about trust in AI and why not so many trust it.
Sure. I think
carry on. Sorry.
Sure. I think at the fundamental level, it's probably the high performing algorithms are black box, so you don't know what are the features that kind of helped create a score or a segment or things like that. So you don't know the underworkings of that. And for someone who's not kind of say that close to stats or AI or machine learning in general, for you to trust something, you need to know what is happening under the hood here.
Yeah.
If you compare like a decision tree to random forest, like it's easier to understand what decision tree is doing, but you don't know what's happening in random forest or a more sophisticated algorithm. So to me, I think the bridge towards more trust in a team overall, if we are kind of early in the journey, is to start with a simpler algorithm, which may have less accuracy, but it's more explainable.
That's great.
And dissect it and understand how it works and what are the features. And then when there is more trust, then go towards the more sophisticated one.
Yeah, that's amazing. So start simple. Right. Well, this has been great. We could have been doing this for about a 3-hour chat. Your questions have been great. Thank you for the involvement on chat. So Charles, Manav, Parker, thanks so much.